The engagement ring hit the hardwood floor with a tiny metallic sound, but to Elowen Hart, it felt louder than anything she had ever heard. She stood frozen in the bright afternoon light streaming through the restaurant windows, watching the man she had planned to marry slide a folded note across the table because he knew she could not hear his voice. The note contained only one sentence: "I cannot spend my life explaining you to people." Elowen looked down at the words, then at the ring, and something inside her finally broke, not because she had been rejected, but because the man who had once promised to love her had made her deafness sound like a burden that needed apologizing for. If you believe kindness can heal what cruelty breaks, if you believe in forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can keep sharing stories that remind us love is still worth believing in. Elowen had been deaf since infancy, but she had never considered herself broken. She had learned American Sign Language as naturally as other children learned spoken words, attended mainstream schools, graduated with honors in early childhood education, and eventually became a patient, gifted art instructor for children who struggled to express emotions. She could read lips when people spoke clearly, but she preferred signing because it allowed her to understand every nuance without guessing. She laughed easily, loved rainy paintings even though she could not hear rain, and had a habit of touching the wooden frames of old houses because she liked imagining the stories hidden inside them. For 3 years, she had been engaged to Callum Reeves, a successful financial consultant whose family had initially welcomed her warmly. But as the wedding approached, Callum became increasingly embarrassed by the practical realities of loving someone who communicated differently. He complained that restaurants were difficult, that she sometimes missed announcements, that introducing her to business associates required patience, and that raising children with her would be complicated. Elowen had spent months convincing herself that his frustration was temporary. That afternoon, she realized it had never been temporary. It had simply been hidden behind a smile. She left the restaurant carrying the ring in her coat pocket, walking beneath the clear afternoon sky with tears sliding silently down her cheeks. At a small public garden, she sat beneath a flowering magnolia and watched families move around her. A little boy chased bubbles. An elderly couple shared a sandwich. A mother pushed a stroller while laughing at something her daughter had done. Elowen watched them and wondered whether love was simply something other people received. Then she noticed a father several yards away struggling with 4 children who seemed determined to occupy every direction at once. One child was climbing a low stone wall, another had dropped a juice box, a third was attempting to chase a pigeon, and the fourth sat on a bench with his arms folded, apparently offended by the entire afternoon. Their father looked exhausted but strangely amused. His name, she would later learn, was Everett Hale. Everett was 36, a single father raising 4-year-old quadruplets after losing his wife, Maribel, to complications shortly after their children were born. His life had become a carefully balanced combination of school schedules, grocery bills, pediatric appointments, laundry, and the endless challenge of making 4 identical birthdays feel equally special. He worked as a civil engineer for a small construction firm, but he had turned down promotions that required constant travel because his children needed him more than his career needed another achievement. He rarely complained. He simply kept moving. That afternoon, when one of the girls noticed Elowen watching them, she waved enthusiastically. Elowen smiled and waved back. Everett noticed the gesture and approached with a polite apology when his youngest daughter, Maisie, suddenly toddled toward Elowen. Elowen crouched to her level and signed a simple greeting. Maisie stared at her hands with fascination. Elowen repeated the sign slowly, smiling. The little girl copied the movement badly, then giggled. Everett immediately understood that Elowen was deaf. Instead of looking uncomfortable, he simply smiled and gestured toward his daughter, asking whether she had taught Maisie something. Elowen typed a short answer on her phone, explaining that she had only taught her how to say hello in sign language. Everett smiled again and thanked her. That should have been the end of their meeting. But when Elowen stood to leave, the quadruplets surrounded her. Maisie wanted another sign. Her brother August wanted to know whether Elowen could draw dinosaurs. Beatrice wanted to show her a purple flower she had picked. And little Theo, the quietest of the four, stared at Elowen with a seriousness far beyond his years. He reached for her hand and carefully placed her fingers into the shape he had seen her make. Elowen realized he was trying to copy the sign for hello. She knelt again, and for several minutes the entire world seemed to disappear. There was no cruel fiancé, no broken engagement, no fear about the future. There was only a woman teaching 4 children a word that required no sound. Over the following weeks, Elowen and Everett began crossing paths repeatedly. Sometimes it happened at the community garden. Sometimes at the children's library. Eventually Everett asked whether she would be willing to teach the quadruplets a few basic signs. The children adored her immediately. She taught them signs for hungry, tired, happy, sorry, please, and love. Everett started learning too. He struggled at first, his large hands awkward and uncertain, but Elowen never laughed at his mistakes. Instead, she patiently corrected him. In return, Everett learned to communicate in ways that did not depend on speaking. He learned to tap a table gently to get her attention, to face her when talking, and to make sure she could see his expression. More importantly, he began noticing how often the world expected Elowen to adapt while rarely making the smallest effort to meet her halfway. The children became the bridge neither adult realized they needed. One afternoon, Elowen arrived at Everett's modest house carrying art supplies for a painting project. The quadruplets raced toward her, and Maisie wrapped both arms around her waist. August grabbed her hand. Beatrice brought her a drawing. Theo stood several feet away, staring at her with an expression that seemed almost protective. Elowen smiled and signed that she had missed them. The children squealed with excitement. Everett watched from the kitchen doorway, feeling something unfamiliar and frighteningly beautiful. His home, which had always felt like a place where 5 people survived together, suddenly felt like a place where 6 people belonged. But Everett was afraid. He had loved Maribel deeply, and guilt had become a quiet companion after her death. He worried that allowing someone new into their lives would somehow erase the mother his children remembered. He also feared that Elowen deserved a life free from the chaos of raising 4 children. One afternoon, while they sat on the porch in the bright sunshine, he finally admitted that he did not know whether he was capable of loving again without feeling guilty. Elowen looked at him for a long moment before signing that loving someone new did not mean loving someone lost any less. Everett read the words slowly, and his eyes filled with tears. The real test came several days later when Callum appeared outside Elowen's workplace. He had come to apologize. He told her that his family had pressured him, that he had panicked, that he had been selfish. He claimed he had realized how much he loved her. For a moment, Elowen remembered the woman she had been before that restaurant afternoon, the woman who had believed his promises. Callum asked for another chance. Elowen listened carefully as he spoke, then calmly signed that forgiveness did not mean returning to the place where someone had hurt you. She forgave him, but she refused to go back. For the first time in her life, she understood that choosing herself was not selfish. Callum's rejection of her had left a scar, but Everett did not try to heal it for her. He simply stood beside her while she healed herself. That difference mattered. He never treated her deafness as something inspiring or tragic. To him, it was simply one part of the woman he had come to love. He admired her humor, her patience, her stubbornness, her creativity, and the way she could make 4 restless children feel understood without raising her voice. Then came the moment that changed everything. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Everett took the children and Elowen to a small lakeside picnic. The quadruplets played with a kite while Everett prepared sandwiches. Elowen sat on a blanket drawing the children as they ran across the grass. When she finished, all 4 crowded around the sketchbook. They were laughing when Beatrice suddenly looked at Everett, then at Elowen, then at her siblings. She tugged on her father's sleeve and asked him something. Everett froze. He looked embarrassed, then emotional. Elowen watched his face carefully. Beatrice had asked whether Elowen was their new mommy. The other 3 children immediately joined in. Maisie nodded enthusiastically. August asked whether she would teach them signs forever. Theo, who had always been the quietest, reached for Elowen's hand and placed it against his chest before looking up at her. Everett knelt beside them, overwhelmed by the innocence of the question. Elowen's eyes filled with tears. She did not want to replace Maribel. She did not want the children to misunderstand what a mother meant. She gently signed that their mommy would always be their mommy, and that nobody could ever take her place. Then she signed that she could be someone who loved them, cared about them, taught them, and stayed beside them if they wanted her there. The children hugged her so tightly that she nearly fell backward. Everett turned away for a moment, wiping his eyes. When he looked back, Elowen was surrounded by 4 little arms, and he realized that his children had understood something adults often forgot: love did not have to replace old love. It could make room for more. Months passed, and their relationship grew naturally. There was no grand transformation overnight. There were messy mornings, spilled cereal, forgotten permission slips, arguments over toys, and days when Everett felt completely exhausted. There were days when Elowen felt insecure, remembering Callum's cruel words. But Everett never asked her to become someone else. Instead, he made sure the family adapted together. The children learned more sign language. Everett became fluent enough to have long conversations with Elowen without speaking. Their home slowly became bilingual in a beautiful way, filled with both spoken words and silent hands. One afternoon, Everett brought Elowen back to the same public garden where they had first met. He had chosen the magnolia tree deliberately. The quadruplets stood nearby holding a handmade sign covered in crooked letters and colorful drawings. Everett took Elowen's hands and signed slowly, carefully, making sure she understood every word. He told her that she had once been made to feel like love was something she had to earn by becoming easier for someone else. He told her that with them, she never had to earn her place. She already had it. Then the children ran forward. Maisie held up the sign, which read, "Our family has 6 hearts." Elowen pressed one hand over her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Everett took a small velvet box from his pocket, but instead of opening it immediately, he waited. He wanted her choice to be completely free. When he finally opened it, there was no enormous diamond, no dramatic gesture, only a simple silver ring chosen because he remembered she liked things that felt meaningful rather than expensive. Elowen smiled through her tears. She did not need to hear the words he said. She could see them in his eyes. She could feel them in the way his hands trembled as he signed. She could see them in the 4 children watching her with hopeful faces. She accepted the ring. The children screamed with happiness and ran around them in circles. Everett laughed. Elowen laughed too, silently but completely, and for the first time since the day she had been dumped for being deaf, she no longer wondered whether someone could love her exactly as she was. Years later, people would sometimes ask Everett when he knew Elowen was the one. He always gave the same answer. It was not when she taught his children sign language. It was not when she accepted his proposal. It was not even when she became part of their family. It was the afternoon he saw her sitting beneath the magnolia tree after someone had convinced her she was difficult to love. She had been heartbroken, but she still stopped to smile at a little girl who knew nothing about her pain. That was when he realized what kind of person she was. She had every reason to become bitter, yet she chose kindness. She had every reason to stop believing in love, yet she kept her heart open. And the 4 children who once asked, "Are you our new mommy?" eventually grew old enough to understand that family is not created by replacing the people we have lost. It is created by choosing, every day, to love the people who remain. Before we reach the end, leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe the greatest lesson of Elowen's journey was: choosing self-respect, forgiving without going backward, or giving love a second chance. Your words may be exactly what someone reading them today needs to hear. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes the person who breaks your heart is not the person who decides your future. Sometimes rejection is simply the doorway to a love that sees you clearly. And sometimes the family you never expected becomes the family that teaches you what you were always worthy of receiving, not pity, not tolerance, but genuine love, respect, and a place to belong.